What if a policy of honesty and no surprises was one of the most powerful things that you could offer in your organization? I'm Caroline Poland, a public speaker, mental health counselor, and the founder and CEO of Poland and Associates Consulting. And today we're going to talk about another characteristic of trauma-informed workplaces: trust and transparency. If you've missed the other videos in this series, make sure that you click on that playlist and you can watch them all there. The reality is that unpredictability is overwhelming to individuals. It can create anxiety, hypervigilance, or withdrawal and shutdown. I've done other videos on uncertainty and unpredictability and talked a little bit about the neurobiology that happens when we are in uncertain or unpredictable situations. But by way of summary, the reality is that we perceive uncertainty or unpredictability as a threat or a potential perception of a threat. And when that happens, we begin to go from our prefrontal cortex back into our amygdala, our survival fight or flight defenses, and we lose what's in our prefrontal cortex: our executive function, our higher level thinking and decision making, and those are things that we really need when we're in the workplace. So when we can minimize unpredictability, especially for people who've experienced trauma, which in reality is a very large percent of the population, the better off we're going to be as an organization. Addressing this helps to support the success and the productivity of our employees, but it also impacts in a very positive way overall organizational health and culture. In trauma-informed workplaces, trust and transparency means that things are clear and predictable and honest. We clarify things for our employees and we are transparent about the why. So it's not just that we're making this decision, but we're explaining the story underneath the story of what's going on, the who, what, why, how of something that's going on. And when that happens, people are able to better understand what's going on. We give advanced warning for something so that people don't just have to quickly react or respond. And that allows them the time and the felt safety to process things in a helpful and productive manner. Stephen Covey says, "Trust is the glue of life. It's the most essential ingredient in effective communication. It's the foundational principle that holds all relationships." So let's dive in and talk about this important principle. In practice, what does this look like in a workplace or in a classroom? So here are a few examples of trust and transparency. We're going to explain before we enforce. Share the purpose or the timeline before a policy lands. Explain a new rule or the why around a new piece of technology that's going to be implemented. When we can explain and we give, again, the who, what, why, how of something, people are better able to understand not only why this is happening, but how they fit into the story. That not only decreases unpredictability, but increases safety. It also looks like no surprise processes, or I would say as little surprise processes as possible. You're going to talk about investigations and promotions and have very visible roadmaps for these things so that people understand how they're going to navigate the processes that occur. I would also add including processes for reporting harassment and discrimination so that individual employees can understand the process that they will go through once they make a report. Thirdly, we're going to talk about confidentiality expectations, where managers say up front what they can keep private and what needs to be escalated. That way, employees understand what they feel comfortable disclosing to a manager and what needs to go beyond them in the organization as a whole. Understanding these things gives felt safety to individuals and helps empower them in knowing the choices that they want to make and how they want to move through conversations. Fourth, we're going to talk about pay and growth clarity. Published salary bands or clear promotion criteria are incredibly important when we're talking about trust and transparency in an organization. And finally, we're going to talk about repairing when harm happens. Now, I really want to talk about this one for a moment because this actually connects to multiple different principles of trauma-informed care in organizations. And one of the important principles that we're talking about within this is the idea that intent and impact can be different. We can have a very positive intent in our words or a decision that we're making, and our impact could in fact be harmful or hurtful, or could just really fall flat. And sometimes people can get defensive, meaning that they start to defend themselves, that they were good in their decision making. Like, I was trying to be a good person, my intent was good. And we need to listen to understand the person who's at the receiving end of that, to understand the impact of our words or our decisions, because sometimes they just don't line up. And so training our managers to understand that fact and to navigate situations when harm or a breach of trust occurs, where we can name what happened and make steps to repair it and talk about what we're going to do better in the future, really is a foundation of trust and transparency in a workplace or in an academic or school-based setting. So as people, how do we decide that people are trustworthy? Well, you probably have a lot of answers to that yourself, but that's a question I would like to throw out there, especially to those of you who are supervisors or managers in a workplace, because that answer will help us translate that into our own actions. But when people do what they say they're going to do, they have appropriate follow through. Generally, we assume that they are more trustworthy individuals, people who are respectful, not just to us, but in the actions that we see to other people. That helps us to determine the safety or trust when there's appropriate follow through and when there's appropriate respect given. The body postures of people can really determine if we view them as safe or not, and facial expressions in general can really help us to determine whether or not someone is trustworthy or not. In fact, there's a really interesting principle that I learned about in grad school, which is this rectangle right here. And that's the area of someone's body that we really look at when we're determining trust and safety. If I'm sitting here and I'm talking to you and my brow is being furrowed and kind of glaring, and you're going to be a little off put by that. You're not going to be drawn into me, certainly. You're not going to maybe feel safe as you're talking to me. But when this area is more relaxed, my eyes have, life behind them and energy behind them, then we tend to view that person as a little bit more safe and trustworthy. So really focusing on that rectangle when you go in to announce a new decision or have a hard conversation with an employee or a student, that might be something that is really helpful to do, as well as making sure that you have an open posture, that you're not sitting, closed off or aggressively leaning forward or anything like that. People who are trustworthy also tend to not demand trust. The reality is that trust is earned, not demanded. And so just because you're in a position, maybe as a manager or supervisor, does not mean that you just automatically demand trust. You've got to earn it. And so when people are willing to earn trust and to say, I understand that this is a dynamic relationship where things are always changing, and I'm going to work to earn your trust. And if something has violated your trust or hurt you, I want to know that so that I can do better. We tend to trust that person more. And so understanding that we've got to earn it from other people, I think, is a huge part in not only being transparent in communication, but also earning trust. And when we talked about respect earlier, but when we can see someone who is working for the safety and well-being of all of the team's members, I think we naturally trust them as well. So again, trust is this very dynamic organism, and there's a lot that goes into that. And I would like to invite you into this process of curious observation for yourself and for others around you, to start to notice what makes you lean in relationship and trust someone, or to feel safe with them, and what makes you kind of push away and not trust someone as much. Because that's important data as we move forward in navigating trust and transparency in the workplace. These are dynamic organizations, and moving beings, so to speak, that impact one another. And the more that we can implement these soft skills and the more that we can implement principles of trauma-informed care, the more success and productivity your organization is going to have. And so instead of just focusing on kind of the dry and concrete and metrics, when we focus on the story underneath the story and we address the humanity of someone else and we make policies and procedures that address that, the healthier and happier everyone is, the more employees are, high-performing employees are retained, and the more success and productivity everybody has. And I think we can all agree that that's what we want for our organizations as a whole. So again, I'm Caroline Poland, and I speak to organizations and businesses around mental health in the workplace, burnout in the workplace, and trauma-informed workplaces and educational settings. If you're interested in having me speak to your business or organization, you can go to my website and fill out a form there, and we will connect. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Poland & Associates, and I have a Substack where I talk about health and well-being at the workplace, and that is conversationswithcaroline.substack.com, and I have linked that below for you. Make sure that you subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and come back for future videos.